I would suggest to get one of the books that actually has some practice tests on it that you can take under timed conditions as a simulated test and see how you do. Most of them also have all the answers, and you can look at the answers and the explanations, score your test, look at the answers, and you get an idea of what you may need to study. So I would highly suggest getting a practice book and working through a simulated test. This will give you an idea of what you need to do. I'm also going to show you some other information about what's on the test. Get ready. Well, there's a lot of things involved in getting ready, but know when you're going, where your test center is. If you've never been there, you might want to do a little test run there to see where it is. Most people take the test at either UNC Charlotte or Garinger. Is that where most of us are taking it? It's also given in Hickory or at Winthrop. If you are taking it particularly at Garinger, be prepared to take a lunch and snack with you and leave it in your car so that you can go and eat, because you're not going to be able to find a place that you can go and eat nearby. Dress comfortably, wear layers, you can put on, take off sweaters, you have no idea how cold or hot the room is going to be. Just be prepared. Pace yourself when it comes time for the test. You know how you're going to know exactly how long you have. We'll talk about that later. Usually the proctor will give you time reminders. They will say you have 1 hour left, you have 30 minutes left, whatever. So pace yourself. We'll talk about that too more specifically. Do question triage. What is triage? If you work triage in an emergency room, does anybody know what that is? Triage deals with the cases that most need help and will most benefit from help. If a patient comes in and is dead or almost dead already, they're going to help someone who they have more of a chance of helping, if they have to pick and choose. If they've got more victims, then if there's been a train wreck and they've got to help people, they're going to help those people that can benefit from the help. If somebody's beyond help, it's not that they forget about them, but they have to use their time where it's most needed. Same thing with questions. If you come to a question, you have no idea what it means, don't waste your time, spend a lot of time thinking about it. Work on this. That's my phone. Probably my pregnant daughter calling. Normally I am off at this time, so I forgot to turn off the phone. I apologize. Triage is working on those questions that you have the most chance of getting right by working on it. We'll talk about that some more too. Think first. Take time to read and think about your questions before you answer. Work by process of elimination. This test, at least the curriculum instruction and assessment section, will be multiple choice. So if you can eliminate one or more of those choices, you come close to getting the correct answer. There is no penalty for guessing on this test. You might recall when you take tests like SAT, they take your total number that's correct and then however many you missed and they subtract a fraction of that. They don't do that for this test. It's simply the number of points you earn. So you certainly should guess. If you can eliminate one or more answers, you've increased the likelihood that you can guess correctly. We'll talk about that some more too. So you answer every question. There is no penalty for guessing. You should answer every question, particularly the multiple choice. Don't miss grid. That's a reminder on there because that's one mistake people make. You get busy and then you realize you've got your answers off. Make sure you keep that straight and know that you're marking the right answer for the right question. And then psych yourself. You know, talk, positive talk. Think positive. And those are just some practice strategies that came together. Did everybody now get a packet?
No.
They're here.
Sure. Did you need to give these out?
Yes, it's entirely, everyone has that. You should have that in your packet.
Did you all have the questions?
It should be in your packet. If it's not, we'll make sure you get those. I have some of these packets were made at different times by different people. But let me go through everything that's in the packet, and then if you don't have those questions, I'll make sure you get them before you leave. Let's go with the first page. It should look like this, has a grid on the front. Is everybody on the same page? It says, Elementary Education Curriculum Instruction and Assessment 0011. This is the first test that you have to take. It is the multiple choice section. You can see on here the number of questions and the amount of time you have. 110 questions, 2 hours. So that means you have about a minute per question. That doesn't sound, with some of the questions you'll do in a whole lot less than a minute. They'll be very easy. You can also see the breakdown of the subject areas from which the questions are taken. You will see that the primary questions are from reading and language arts, and math, then second mathematics, and then some from the science, social studies, arts, and PE, and some are just general questions. This would be things that you might have learned in Ed Psych or models or some of those courses, just general things about curriculum that aren't subject specific. Okay, that gives you an idea. The next page gives you the exact objectives that the questions are taken from. This can be used as your study guide. Go through this list of topics and you will see, hopefully, that you're familiar with most of this, because this is what's been covered in your classes. I would go through and kind of check off the ones I knew I'd have a certain mark I'd put next to them, and the ones that were questionable, I might put a question mark. Give me an idea of what I might want to bone up on. You can then go back and pull your textbooks from these topics, notes, research so that you can study. But you'll see it's things that I hope you're familiar with. For example, under the reading and language arts, on page 25, I see writing process, pre-writing, drafting, revising, editing, publishing. Hopefully that's not new to you. And you'll know what happens at those stages. Under mathematics, I see things like number concepts, counting, comparing, classifying, exploring, ordering. Hopefully those are things that are quite familiar to you from your classes. Addition and subtraction of whole numbers. I see things like classroom management and motivation for mathematics instruction. That would be things like how to use calculators, grouping students, things like that. So looking through those objectives will tell you exactly what the content of the test is and can serve as a study guide for you. Any questions so far? Okay. The next page of your packet, after the objectives, is some sample questions that are on this test. There are questions of several kinds. Some of them ask you to look at something first and then answer questions about it. Some of them are simply an individual question where you just read and answer a question. There's some examples of them. Here's one. The first one that's your example is one that has you look at something, think about it, and answer one or more questions. So you might see something like this. The sample questions that follow illustrate the kinds of questions in the test. They are not, however, representative of the entire scope of the test, but they'll give you an idea. If you want more, do a practice test. Get some practice books. But here's an example. They have 4 students work here in mathematics. Okay. And then think about, before you worry about questions, remember, think first. We saw that. Think about what they might be asking about these. They're probably going to want you to figure out what students did right and wrong here. The illustrations above show how 4 students use base 10 blocks to represent the number 32. Which of the students used the blocks to represent the number 32 in a way that reveals an understanding of the underlying concepts of numeration system? And which one did it correctly? Okay. They may also ask some questions like, what mistake a certain student made. Like, what was, what do you think Davila's error was?
All one.
It's all ones. Okay, so some of them will have you look at something first and answer one or more questions. Others will give you a scenario. A small group of second grade students are reading a story together orally. One of the children has difficulty reading the word sparkled. To make sure that all of the students understand the word, the teacher asked the student to read the rest of the paragraph aloud. probably know what the teacher's doing if you remember your reading class. Then, when the student has finished reading, the teacher asks the group how the character in the story felt as she spoke and what her eyes did to show her excitement. What method was the teacher using? Context clues. Okay. Which of the following is one of the limitations of the word attack strategy described in the scenario above? They're not going to say of context clues because they don't want to give away the previous answer, but that's what they're asking. What is the limitation of context clues? Which of those would be the limitation of using context clues? The text might not contain sufficient information to supply the definition being sought. Okay. Then there's questions like question 4, which are just an isolated question. An 8-year-old tries to ice skate by moving her legs in the same way that she has done when roller skating. Which of the following of Piaget's concepts of development does this behavior exemplify? You either know that or you don't.
Assimilation.
Okay? If you know it, you know it. But if you don't, what would you do? Take a guess and go on. Don't waste time on it. Then the next one has you look at something and then answer questions. And it's asking, it says the above examples above are representative of a student's work. If the error pattern indicated in these examples continues, the student's answer to the problem 9/11 minus 1/7 will most likely be what? Well, you got to figure out first what's the error pattern up here before you look at the choices. The student is subtracting both numerator and denominator, so your answer would be C. Okay. And then 6 is just like 4. They just give you a question, you answer it. Same with 7, and then 8 gives you a scenario. I'm not going to go over all of this today because of time, but you'll have the packet. That's an example. Now, if you weren't sure, you can read the explanations for why the answer is correct or incorrect. Okay, so that's what that is. The next page should be the other test, content area exercises. Now this is very different from the one we just looked at. It covers the same kind of information, but in a very different way. It is a constructed response test, which means you're going to be given a scenario with it's open-ended. And you're going to have to construct your answer. You have to write it. They say it's essay, but it's really not essay, because what does essay imply?
Paragraph.
That you've got to write in a certain style and a certain form. You do not. Constructed response, you simply have to convey the content appropriately and answer the questions. So there are 4, it says essays, but it's actually 4 constructed response items. They're going to give you 4 scenarios, and you're going to have to construct your answer to what those scenarios ask you. You have 2 hours to do it. That sounds like a lot, but it's really not. The hardest thing about this test is having enough time to get everything down that you want to get down. I've taken it, and it's not easy. You have to almost just do bare bones. I never would advise someone to just do bare bones, but in this instance, you get your basics down, and if you have time, then you flesh it out. And I'll go over that with you of how to do that. That doesn't mean that you just jot down anything. There are certain things you have to put in your answer, and I will go over that with you. You have 2 hours for 4 scenarios, so that means you've got about 30 minutes per question. It's going to take you a good 5 to 10 minutes to read the question and to figure out what they're asking you to do with the information they gave you and set up your answer. By the time you read all 4 items and figure out what they want you to say and kind of set up your answer, you're going to have about 20 minutes to write the information down. So you have to really prepare and be ready. And I'll give you some strategies for doing that. So they also give you a scoring guide, and this is very important. And I want everybody to look down here where number 5 is, because that's what you want to do. To get a 6 is almost impossible in the amount of time you have. But if you get a 5 on every question, you're going to pass with flying colors. You can probably even get 4s and still pass. Strive for 5. That's what I always tell people. Strive for 5. you will notice what you have to do to get a 5. You have to answer all important parts of the exercise clearly and successfully. Anything it tells you to do, you have to do. If it has 3 parts, you have to do all 3 parts. If it says give an example, you have to give an example. If it says give 2 examples, you have to give 2 examples, but don't give 3. Don't waste time. Give them 3. Give 2. Figure out exactly what it is they want you to respond to and respond to it. That's the secret to passing this test. And then you have to have a strong understanding of the subject, human growth and development, and pedagogy required by the exercise. The answers have to be coherent, organized, and developed. They have to make sense. They don't have to be written in complete sentences necessarily. For example, a listing might be okay for some of the questions, depending on what they want you to do. A chart might answer a part of a question. So you're not limited to just using narrative or words or sentences. You have to spell well enough that they can understand what you're trying to say. You have to write legibly enough that they know what you're trying to write. And you have to use style well enough that they can make coherent sense. Okay, they do not take off for spelling, grammar, or style unless it interferes with getting the content across. They understand that you're writing on the spot. Even a 4, the difference is the 4, you have an accurate, perhaps limited understanding of the subject matter. That's the main difference between a 4 and a 5. And I'm going to show you some examples of those later. You must answer all parts of every question to pass. If you don't, no matter how well you did on the part you answered, you're not going to pass that question. So it's very important that you answer all parts of all questions. Very, very important. The next page in your packet gives you an example of what they might ask you to do for your constructive response. Here's your sample. Here are representative writing samples produced by one student as part of the writing activities in a 2nd grade class. Now you're going to have to think as you're reading. What grade are they addressing? 2nd grade. What subject is it? It's writing. And what is this? It's examples from one student. It's not examples from 3 or 4 different students. So just think as you're writing. You might even want to circle words. You can mark all over your book, as it will help you answer the questions. There will be a specific area on which to actually write your response, and that's the part they'll actually grade. You can make any notes to yourself on the page. So you might circle 2nd grade, so you can remember that as you're making your answer. So you look at the examples, and here's what it tells you to do. How many parts of your question are there? Parts to your response? No? 2 parts, and then there's subparts within the 2 parts. Part 1, part 2. So the first thing you would want to do, and this is what I recommend people do, is go ahead and set your paper up. Now you could make a little outline over here on the side underneath, but that's going to kind of waste time. I go ahead to the paper itself where I'm going to write the answer, and I would put 1, and then I'd skip down to about halfway over, and I'd put 2, because I know there's 2 parts. And then I look at those parts, and I figure out what they have in them. List 5 important aspects of writing text production that the student seems to understand or seems to control. So guess what I do? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I go down my page. I'd be leaving space. You know, there's going to be several pages to write your response. So I know what I'm going to do. And then part 2 says describe 2 ways the teacher could assist this student in the continued development of writing skills. The first example should contain one or more activities that would build on the student's strengths in written expression. Since it says one or more, how many will you do? One. Don't waste time doing more. Do one. Do one good one. The second example should suggest a way for building on the student's strengths in the mechanics of writing. So this one's going to be about what? Written expression. And this one's going to be about what? What's the second one? Mechanics. You might even write in mechanics. Written expression. And then you can write your response when you get ready to do it. And I would like, just to remind myself, I might put the student understands now I'm set up to answer that question. I'm going to then go to my next question. Set it up. And next we set it up. And next we set it up. Once they're all set up, then I'm going to go back and answer all of them. Go ahead and set your paper up that way. They give a couple of sample responses. One of them is an example that received a 5. Remember, that's what you're striving for. Which means if they got a 5, what does that mean? Did they answer all parts of the question? Yes. Did they show a good understanding of the subject matter? And you can read the other things there. Okay? And notice they have 1, 2, just like I showed you to do there. Seems to me that the student who wrote these stories has an understanding of sequencing events. In each of these paragraphs, he or she has put all of the events in chronological order using good transition words. To get a 5, you have to include an explanation. You can't just say, the student understands chronological order and go on. You have to tell why you said that. And that's what the student did. They told why they think the student has an understanding of sequencing. They just gave a little sentence. It does not even have to be in a complete sentence. You can just say, student understands sequencing. Explanation, listing. You can do it that way if you want to. You can do it narratively as this person did, or you can just say, number 1, sequencing. Explanation, that's your explanation. Number 2, you could just put number 2, presenting main idea. And you give the explanation. 3, actually I think this is better than narrative. They use words like secondly, which is okay, but it's time consuming. Creating a new paragraph to start it, I'll do your thought. 3, paragraph. For example, in his or her bank robbing story, new paragraph was started for the event of the new day. They gave their explanation. The next one, supporting the main idea. And then explanation. In each of his or her stories, the main topic is stated, and most of the sentences afterwards pertain to that main topic. So you understand what they did there. Explanation. Second part of the question. One suggestion I would make to the teacher to develop the student's writing would be to encourage the increase of his vocabulary. This can be done by a way of brainstorming activity with the entire class, and they give the details. When you describe an activity, you have to say what you do during the activity, not just naming it. And then secondly needs to be about mechanics. I think the teacher should encourage the identification of characters. Well, that's not about mechanics, but they have a family. So what did they do? They gave 2 examples. You don't need to do that. They wasted time. Their third one about mechanics. Encourage the teacher, the student to clarify their thoughts. So you might see how they got 5. This to me that doesn't make sense. But that's what you have to do. 2, you can see immediately why this answer received a 2 without even reading it. Did the student answer all parts of the question? It's pretty clear they did. It was too short to have done that. And notice what the second word, and what does it say? Students. What does that show that they did not do? Yeah, they didn't read what the directions were. They thought this was 3 different students instead of 1 student. They didn't think first. I do have some other questions I'm going to give you later, if you don't have them in your packet. We'll look at those. But then your next part of your packet is just 2 more groups of handouts on those same 2 tests. It just may give you some additional information. It should repeat the same information you've already seen. And then you've got facts about the test and scoring. You have that what you have? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Curriculum instruction assessment, same thing you already saw. Then give you some facts about the test that are important to know. You can answer the sections of the test in any order. Any of them, multiple choice or the other one. You don't have to go from 1 to 110. You don't have to answer the first constructive response first. You can skip around. They will not say to stop after a certain part of the test. You just have the full time for the full test. So answer them in whatever order best suits you. I suggest that people first answer the ones you know. That way you've got them down. On the constructive response, I tell people to put down the stuff they know first before they start worrying about the ones they don't know. Get as much down as you can. So answer them in any order. There's not trick questions. They're not meant to fool or trick you. Don't worry about answer patterns. The order of the answers is computer generated, so don't say, oh, I've got too many B's or too many C's. Don't worry about that. No penalty for guessing. We talked about that already. It's okay to write your test booklet. We talked about that already. Some people find it's helpful to mark each answer on the test booklet as they answer it. That way, if they misgrid, it's easy to go back, or if they decide to go back and check an answer, they can do that. I like to put a little check mark, or like a little star by the ones that I know. Then when I go back and check over, I don't waste my time on that. You'll have to develop your own system. If you do a couple of practice tests, that will give you an idea of how you might be most comfortable doing that. But use that test booklet space to your advantage. Make sure you put your answers in the right bubbles. Make sure you understand the question. What is it that they are asking me? Narrow down your answers. You can almost always eliminate at least one of your multiple choice, and usually 2. There's a piece of advice I give for Praxis that seems to be helpful. When you are narrowing down and you've got 2 answers and they both seem correct and you're thinking, which is this? Try to think of the most general situation that the beginning teacher would be facing, because that's who this test is written for. Don't try to think of every exception in the book. So if it comes down where one seems to be generally true, but then there's exceptions that make the other one true, then the one that's generally true is probably the one to choose, because that's what this test is testing. Do you have good general knowledge that applies to most new teachers everywhere? Read all the possible answers before selecting one. Check your answers. These are just good test-taking tips. Don't worry about your score or panic. They give more information about the topics that are on the test. That was already given in the other packet. And then you see the same for the content area exercises, 4 30-minute exercises. Posed problems required extended written responses. That's explained better than say an essay. And the same kind of answers. Outline your answer before you start writing. Focus on the topic. Don't worry about what they didn't ask, just what they did. Your writing must be legible and intelligible. It's one of the facts. These people are used to reading lots of different kinds of handwriting. There are professional graders which look at these, but you do want it to be legible. You don't have to write in cursive. If you're a person that likes to print, that's okay. Spelling and grammar will not be scored. Crossing out will not be counted against you. In fact, don't spend a lot of laborious time erasing or anything like that. Just cross out something and go. They understand that you're writing on the fly. It's not an essay test in the sense that you don't need to write an essay. You don't have stylistic demands. Sometimes a list or a diagram might be all that's needed. It's a constructive response test. Answer the questions in the order that's best suited to you. We talked about that already. keep track of the time, check your work, don't panic, kind of same things you already saw. And then there are some general tips on preparing. Assessing how well you know the content of each of the 4 subject areas. Use that list of objectives in the first handout to go through and see which of those areas you might want to read up in on or study up on. Develop the study plan. Figure out, okay, I've got X amount of time until I have to take the test. How much am I going to study weekly, daily, whatever? Are you going to put aside every Saturday afternoon to study? Whatever. Your schedule, each of us has different schedules. So just set up your time and stick to it. Identify study materials. Textbooks, notes are good. Sometimes getting a textbook for teaching that subject is helpful. Just looking at it. Take a sample test, they suggest that, and score it. Again, they give you the scoring guide that we've already looked at for, what is it, 654-3. Now, how many of you have these questions? How many don't have these questions in your packet? We can make some more copies of those. What this is the example, I'll get you some more copies if you need it. 4 sample scenarios that might represent the 4 scenarios that you're going to see on a constructive response test. The first one is a language arts scenario. Almost always your first one's going to be language arts. You're going to have a language arts one on there. Your second one is a math. Expect that you are going to have 1 language arts and 1 math question. Your third one is either social studies or science. And your last one is some sort of curriculum integration question where you might be integrating fine arts with math or English or whatever. Okay, so you're going to have those 4. You're definitely going to have a language arts, you're definitely going to have a math, you're going to have a social studies or science, and you're going to have some integrated question. Here's an example of how these scenarios might need to be set up. This one is long. It's going to take a long time just to read the question. But what it is, this question is in 3 parts. As you can see, it has A, B, C. So in setting up my answer for that one, I would take my answer section and I'd put A, and maybe go to the next page and put B, next page I'd put C. It's telling you it's a 3rd grade class. It's exploring the theme of friendship in language arts. One of the stories the class will be reading is Angelina and Alice by Catherine Holleberg. The book is about 2 friends who help each other learn gymnastics tricks to perform at the town fair. The friends learn that by working together and helping each other, they not only improve their performance, but also become closer friends. Even if you've never heard about or read that book before, they've given you enough information that you can answer this question. Using the story Angelina and Alice as the core of a lesson on, use the story as the core of a lesson on friendship. So you know what they're wanting you to do. You think about, if I was going to do a lesson on friendship and use this book, what would I do? Notice that it says, and I would circle this or mark it in my question book, be sure to explain why each activity or technique you suggest is appropriate. So when I was setting up my question, I would have A, activity, and then I'd write explanation to make sure that I didn't forget to do the explanation. And here's what they ask you to do. Describe a pre-reading activity. Okay, and they give you the details. Then they tell you to do something to use during reading. And then the C tells you to do something after reading. So I would set up my page. A, B, C. Those would probably be on 3 different pages. What's A? And for what? Pre-reading. Just to remind myself, it's pre-reading, during, and after. And I have to do 2 things. What are the 2 things I have to do for each of those? I have to give the activity and the explanation. So I'm going to go ahead and set up my paper. I might even abbreviate. Explanation. There we go. Abbreviated. Activity. Explanation. Now I'm set up to write my answer. Now I'm going to go back and look at the details of what I've got to include. For A, the activity should be age appropriate. What age am I working with? Third grade. And should reflect the friendship theme of the book. So whatever activity I pick should have something to do with friendship, right? The activity should be focused and detailed and should demonstrate an understanding of the principles of reading instruction as well as an understanding of how children learn. So I'm going to be fairly detailed in my explanation, and I'm going to make sure that I say this activity is appropriate because, and I'll probably make some reference to how children learn, right? Why it's appropriate. And I'm going to do that for all of those when I write my explanation. Okay. The next question is a math question, and it's in 3 parts. You can clearly see there are 3 things they want you to do. So I would set up my page A, B, and C. Here's the scenario. Suppose you have a 2nd grade class, 2nd grade, with 25 students in a small elementary school. It is the first month of the new school year. Your objective is to teach addition of 2 and 3-digit numbers without regrouping. But you find 10 of your students do not know basic addition facts and do not understand place value. The remaining 15 students know the basic addition facts and understand place value and would very likely be bored by a lesson in which you reteach these concepts. So you can pretty much picture what they're going to want you to do, right? You're going to talk about what you're going to do with those 2 different groups. A says describe 3 different activities. And guess what? I'm going to set up A, 1, 2, 3. That would help the 10 children who need help with addition facts. The activity should help the children develop conceptual understanding and familiarity to the basic facts. How do you develop conceptual understanding of the facts? Yeah, use some manipulatives. They mark out 2 plus 2 is 4. So that's one activity right there. One activity might be using manipulatives to make number sentences. Okay? How do you develop familiarity with basic facts and ability to recall facts with speed and accuracy? Well, flashcards might be one, right? So you've got 2 right there, 2 of your activities right there. Provide examples. So guess what I would do? Example, I'd write it in there of what the children would be doing. So don't just say, I would use flashcards. What would the children be doing? They would be showing the flashcards to one another and checking each other's answers. Or they would be working in pairs to use the base 10 blocks to form the sentences, the number sentences, whatever they're going to do. You just do exactly what they ask you to do. Set it up by reminding yourself with the word there to remind you that you're going to put the explanation. So by that activity, you make sure that you would say, example of what the children would do. You might even want to write in an example. For B, they want 3 activities to help the 10 children who do not understand place value. Provide examples of what the children would be doing. So now instead of talking about number facts, we're talking about place value. So you'd probably have the students doing things like working with number sticks and cubes. Regrouping, actually taking 10 blocks and then taking 10 and bundling sticks, anything like that. And then C tells you to only provide how many activities? 2. So don't worry about providing 3. Only provide 2 for the 15 children who do not read teaching. Provide examples. So you're doing exactly the same for all 3 parts, except you're only providing 2 examples to the third one. Okay? You're doing exactly what they asked you. Question 3 is your science or social studies question. It's in 3 parts. And what it is, it's talking about a field trip. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through every bit of that one. I'll save that for you to do on your own. Question 4 has only 2 parts. It just says, but there's some steps. A is, what steps would you take to guide them through the writing process, and explain each step briefly. So I'd put, for each, you didn't tell you how many steps, you have to figure out how many steps, but you make sure you explain each step briefly. And then B, you do have a certain number, 3 writing activities to use, give specific examples. So again, I'd go 1, 2, 3, activity, explanation. Okay? So that's how you do it. Okay, we've got a little bit of time for questions before you have class tonight. Yes?
How do you feel about the test that you can take on the computer that they offer now?
It is brand new, so I know nothing about it.
That would be the same format?
Yes.
And everything like that?
From my understanding, it's only the multiple choice that's available on computer. Now, I know they offer the Praxis I that way, and some people like the computer, some don't. You probably know if you like to read things off computer screen or
But I just
not.
think it would be easier. I can't believe they don't have the multiple choice when the big part of the computer would hopefully be the essay, so then you can just
Yeah.
type it out.
Right, but now they haven't developed that yet. I think that's coming. But my understanding, it is just the first one
And how
that's
long does it take to
available.
get the grades back?
About 4 weeks. About 4 weeks.
What's the minimum passing score for?
This minimum passing score is not a minimum score on each test. There's a combination score, and I think it's 313. I believe. So you can do better on one test and not as well on the other, and still attain the passing score. So it's a combination. There is not a minimum on each test. It's a combination. And I really can't tell you what those scores mean. They're raw scores, so I have no idea how that compares to percentage of questions. But I do know that when people get a 5, at least a 5 on each written thing, that they pass. But I don't know how that raw score compares to percentage of questions. I know your raw score is between 100 and 200 on each test. So the lowest you can make is 100, even if you have 0. I'm not quite sure how those raw scores and percentages of questions. It's just a number. They just chose a number.
January.
It's not offered until January?
There is one in November, but I think it's too late to sign up for it. You can check on the ETS website. Check on the ETS website. I know there's one November 9th, but I think it is too late to sign up. Unless, now you can always show up at a test center, and if they have space to take you, they'll take you.
Okay.
So some people do that and sign up on the spot, go on the spot. But January, I believe, is the next. January 15th, somewhere around then.
January 15th.
The website to register is ets.org, www.ets.org/praxis. And it'll take you through anything you need there. Pick your stage, show you the score, it'll tell you how to register, what you have to do. I don't know anything about the new computerized CIA test.
Okay.
I haven't taken it, but I do know how they do it with Praxis I, and it's what that one is too. If it's the same as Praxis I, if you don't pass, if you've taken, you've answered enough questions wrong that you couldn't possibly pass, it doesn't keep asking you questions. Although they probably will for this since it's a total. So they probably won't have that feature on this. Since it's a total though, they will keep asking you. But Praxis I, if you reach a stage where you didn't pass, it just shuts down and says you didn't pass. This one though, since it's a total, they probably won't keep doing it until pass. You won't know that it shuts down. It will just say, thank you, the test is complete. But
Okay.
it's set up to be that way purposely, that they don't keep a person answering if they're getting too many wrong. But since this one is a total score, they'll do that. Other questions?
Where do you get the, you said the Praxis books?
Yes.
ETS, do you get that on like Barnes & Noble?
Yes, you can get them there. You can order them from Amazon. You can buy them off of the ETS site. They're usually more expensive on the ETS site, but what you do is go on the ETS site, make sure you know what booklet it is you want, and then order it from Amazon. I saved a lot of money that way. But what I did notice that they have now that they didn't before, and this is a cheaper alternative even to buying the book at Amazon, you can just download from the ETS site, and it's a much cheaper price than buying the book. So if you want to just download, and if you have access to printing it off, and you can do that without cost, you may just want to download off of ETS site, and that's the quickest way to get those materials. And it's inexpensive compared to buying a book. So I suggest do use the ETS book, but don't buy it from ETS. It's more expensive. Buy it from Amazon. And I would say that I have the book, but people keep borrowing my books and I never get them back. I figure they need them more than I do. So there's that. You are welcome.